Harold Eugene Eddie Green, born on November 2nd, 1898, and passed away on April 10th, 1934, was an American bank robber and Depression-era outlaw during the 1930s. He is best known as a member of the John Dillinger Gang. Eugene Green, born in 1898, lived in Pueblo, Colorado with his mother and brothers James and Frank. Their father had died when Eddie was 3. The following is the criminal record of Edward Green, also known by aliases Eugene Green, George Graham, Charles Ryan, George Green, Fred Rogger and Frederick Riley. As Eugene Green, he was arrested on August 11, 1916 by the Milwaukee Police Department in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, charged with grand larceny. He received 6 months in the House of Corrections. As George Graham, he was arrested by the St. Paul Police Department in St. Paul, Minnesota on July 7, 1921. The charge was for investigation. As Fred Rogger, he was arrested by the Minneapolis Police Department in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The charge was suspected auto theft and he received 90 days suspended. He was arrested by the St. Paul Police Department on July 17, 1922, charged with robbery and then released. As Frederick Riley, he was arrested by the Des Moines Police Department in Des Moines, Iowa on August 8, 1922. The charge was for investigation. He was suspected of auto theft and safe blowing and was a fugitive from Minneapolis. He was released. As Eddie Green, he was received at the State Reformatory in St. Cloud, Minnesota on November 15, 1922. Charged with first-degree robbery, he was convicted and sentenced to 40 years, serving 5 years. As Eddie Green, he was received at the Minnesota State Prison in Stillwater, Minnesota on July 26, 1923, on a transfer from the State Reformatory. After his parole, Eddie occasionally worked in iron mills while becoming a skilled jug marker, which is someone who chooses which bank to rob. Green took part in his first major bank robbery on January 28, 1933, when he joined Earl Doyle, Thomas Buck Wolfe, and Dago Howard Lansdon in robbing a bank messenger in North Kansas City of $14,500. During the robbery, a shootout occurred that left Marshal Edgar Knoll and Wolfe wounded. The gang later battled a pursuing posse, largely made up of local residents, and escaped by stealing one of their cars. Green and his partners fled to Iowa, where they stole spare license plates from 2 vehicles and kidnapped 2 Knoxville police officers, Bert Conry and John Newman, before returning to Missouri. Releasing the hostages in Unionville on January 29th, they also dropped off Wolfe, who was arrested at a hospital in Coffeyville, Kansas, 4 days later. Wolfe, who had been shot in the groin, died soon after being transferred to the county jail in Liberty, Missouri. 3 months later, Green joined Jess Doyle, Earl Chrisman, Frank Jelly Nash, Volney Davis, brothers Arthur and Fred Barker, and Alvin Karpis to rob a bank in Fairbury, Nebraska on April 4, 1933. Chrisman was badly wounded during the robbery and Green drove him to Vern Miller's house in Kansas City to recover. Chrisman eventually died from his wounds and was buried in an unmarked grave outside town. Green eventually became displeased with the tactics used by the Barker brothers and began to seek a new gang, resurfacing as an associate of Babyface Nelson late in 1933 and early 1934, along with Tommy Carroll and Homer Van Meter. Later, he became a member of the reorganized John Dillinger Gang in early 1934. His first robbery with the group, then including Dillinger, Tommy Carroll, Homer Van Meter and Babyface Nelson, was on March 6th when they held up a bank in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for $49,500. Green also provided the gang with an extra gunman, Tommy Carroll. A week later in Mason City, Iowa, despite casing the bank with Van Meter beforehand at an estimated $250,000, and using a series of diagrams and planned getaway routes made by Green, the gang grabbed only $52,000, taking 25 hostages to make their getaway possible. Both Dillinger and John Red Hamilton were wounded in their shoulders, as well as an innocent bystander that Nelson mistook for a cop during their escape. Returning to St. Paul, Green provided a safe house for Dillinger and Van Meter. However, the FBI had been on Dillinger's trail for some time, as they were for many Depression-era outlaws and were getting close to capturing him. On March 31st, federal agents raided the hideout and surprised the three, who managed to escape after an ensuing shootout. Dillinger was wounded in the escape, and while Green arranged for medical treatment in Minneapolis, the FBI came up with a lead on Dillinger's benefactor. When investigators were searching Dillinger's abandoned apartment, they discovered a telephone number which they traced to one of Green's hideouts in St. Paul. Green and his common-law wife Bessie turned up at the safe house on April 3rd. Green left the car and proceeded to enter the apartment when he was ambushed by federal agents, armed with Thompson machine guns, and was shot in the head and shoulder. The FBI defended its actions amid conflicting reports that Green had either attempted to flee or was gunned down in cold blood, claiming that Green assumed a threatening attitude, accompanied by menacing gestures. The FBI would receive heavy criticism from the press in regards to the death of an unarmed suspect, which slowed their investigation of Dillinger. Green was taken to a hospital in St. Paul, where he died from his wounds 7 days later. He was delirious for the week before his death, allowing federal agents to record every word he said. Among the information they were able to gain included revealing the existence of the Carpis Barker gang, whom they were able to capture within 10 months. His wife, then held in custody for harboring her husband, told the police the names of Dillinger's gang upon her husband's death. She also confirmed that the Carpis Barker gang was responsible for the January 1934 kidnapping of Edward Bremer, and named all of the gang members along with their girlfriends, leading to the issuing of federal indictments against them.